Let me ask you something. When was the last time you compromised who you are just to keep the peace, or said yes when your gut screamed no? Smart women, I mean the truly self-aware, boundary-setting kind, never break these 7 rules. Not because they're perfect, but because they've learned the hard way. Breaking these rules costs you peace, power, and self-respect. Let's talk about the 7 rules you should never break if you want to walk through life clear, confident, and in control. Let me tell you something I've learned from both watching and working with some of the sharpest women I know. Smart women don't treat their boundaries like preferences. They treat them like policies, not because they're cold or rigid or difficult, but because they've come to understand that unclear boundaries lead to messy relationships. And messy relationships lead to drained energy, blurred identities, and silent resentment that builds up like rust in your gut. See, here's the truth. Most people won't tell you your boundaries aren't up for debate. They're not something you put out there just to see who respects them. They're something you hold firmly, regardless of how others respond. And smart women, they've learned not to flinch when that line gets tested. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Every single time you let something slide that rubbed you the wrong way, every time you said, it's fine when it wasn't, or brushed it off because I didn't want to make it a big deal, you weren't keeping the peace. You were teaching them your discomfort is negotiable. And it's not. Smart women know this. That's why when they say no, it's not with attitude. It's with clarity. It's not about being rude or distant. It's about being rooted in self-respect. When you set a boundary, you're not building a wall. You're putting up a fence with a gate that you control. And that gate only opens to what aligns with your peace, your purpose, and your principles. You know the kind of woman I'm talking about, the one who doesn't even have to raise her voice to be taken seriously. Her energy says, I won't be disrespected before her mouth does. And that's not magic. That's consistency. That's a woman who's reinforced her own standards so many times that now people just know it's not easy. In fact, some of the hardest moments in life are when you first start setting those boundaries. People will test you, not because they're evil, but because they're used to the version of you who used to say yes. They're used to the you who overextended, who always made it work, even if it meant you were last on your own list. And when you start saying things like, no, I'm not available for that, or that doesn't work for me, don't be surprised if they look confused, maybe even upset. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's a sign you're finally doing it right. And look, you don't have to explain every boundary you set. No is a full sentence. I'm not available for that is a complete thought. You don't need a PowerPoint presentation to justify protecting your time, your energy, or your emotional bandwidth. Smart women know that every time you over-explain, you leave room for negotiation. And some people, they're just waiting for that opening. Now, this part's key: consistency. Boundaries don't work if you only enforce them on a good day. They don't work if you drop them the minute someone pushes back. They only work when they're upheld with quiet confidence. Not in anger, not in frustration, just calm certainty. That's the posture of someone who's done the work, someone who's no longer willing to trade peace for approval. You don't have to be mean to be clear. You just have to be unavailable for anything that costs you more than it gives. And once people understand that about you, not from your words, but from your patterns, that's when the shift happens. That's when respect stops being requested and starts being assumed. So the next time you feel that nudge to speak up, to draw that line, to say, this is not okay with me, I want you to remember this. You're not being difficult. You're being clear. You're not rejecting others. You're protecting yourself. And if that costs you a few people who only liked you when you were convenient, let it. Because smart women don't break their own rules just to keep other people comfortable. They lead with self-respect and they let the world adjust. Let them adjust. There's a heavy cost that comes with saying yes when everything in you wants to say no. And most people don't see it until they've paid it too many times. Smart women, they learn early, or sometimes the hard way, that peace bought at the expense of their own truth isn't peace at all. It's a quiet kind of self-betrayal. one that looks calm on the outside, but feels like tension under the skin. It's smiling in a room where your voice doesn't feel safe. It's nodding when you want to walk away. And over time, that pattern chips away at your confidence, your clarity, your sense of self. Let me be clear. This isn't about becoming a person who says no to everything or who refuses to be flexible. This is about discernment. This is about knowing the difference between choosing peace and pretending everything's fine so you don't rock the boat. There's a difference. One empowers you. The other drains you. We've all been there. Someone asks you to do something you don't really want to do. You're tired. You've got too much on your plate. You know it's going to throw off your week, but still you say yes because you don't want to disappoint, because you don't want to seem selfish, because you've been taught that being nice matters more than being honest. But let me ask you something. How nice is it really to show up resentful? How kind is it to say yes with your mouth when your heart is screaming no? That's not kindness. That's fear wearing a polite smile, and it never ends well. Smart women have figured this out. They've learned that protecting their peace doesn't require an apology. They've come to understand that if your yes isn't genuine, your presence won't be either. They've traded approval for alignment, and that's a trade worth making every single time. Here's what happens when you start honoring your no. You get clear, not just with others, but with yourself. You stop overthinking every decision. You stop second guessing what you need. You stop rehearsing explanations in your head just to make other people feel comfortable. You start trusting yourself again, and that trust becomes your anchor, your compass, your guide. And yes, some people will push back. They're used to the version of you who was always available, always agreeable, always the fixer. When that version starts to shift, don't be surprised if the room gets quiet. That's not rejection. That's recalibration. The people who truly respect you will adjust. The ones who only loved your compliance will fall away. Let them. There's power in saying no without guilt. And I'm not talking about the loud, aggressive kind of no. I'm talking about the grounded one. The no that comes from knowing your capacity. The no that says, I could, but it would cost me too much, and I'm not willing to pay that anymore. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You don't have to explain every decision. You don't need to wrap your no in 500 words of apology. No, I'm not available. No, I can't take that on. That's enough. And when it's not enough for someone else, that's their discomfort to sit with, not yours to solve. Smart women have learned to pause before responding. They don't give knee-jerk yeses just to avoid the discomfort of saying no. They take a breath. They check in with themselves. They ask, does this serve me? Do I have the energy for this? Am I doing this out of alignment or obligation? And if the answer points to no, they listen, because they know that ignoring that voice, that gut instinct always leads to regret. It's not selfish to protect your bandwidth. It's not rude to value your time. It's not mean to put yourself first when you've spent years coming in last. That's not ego. That's wisdom. And the people who want to walk with you long term, they won't just understand it, they'll respect it. So stop giving away parts of yourself just to keep situations smooth. Stop trading your peace for temporary approval. Start trusting that your no doesn't make you less loving. It makes your yes mean something. Because smart women know when you stop saying yes to what drains you, you finally have room to say yes to what fulfills you. Let's talk about something we don't always give enough credit to: your emotions, not the polished ones. Not the ones that show up well behaved and socially acceptable. I'm talking about the raw ones, the inconvenient ones, the ones that hit you in the car, in the shower, in the silence. Smart women know something powerful about those emotions. They're not drama, they're data. And if you can learn to read them instead of suppressing or apologizing for them, they'll tell you everything you need to know. We grow up with messages like, don't be too sensitive, or calm down, or you're overreacting. And over time, we start to believe that feeling deeply is a weakness. That to be taken seriously, we have to disconnect from what's going on inside. So we tuck those emotions away. We minimize them. We rationalize them. But here's the thing. Emotions don't disappear just because you ignore them. They just find other ways to speak. Through stress, through burnout, through tension in your body that won't go away, through choices you can't explain and patterns you wish you could break. Smart women don't let their emotions run the show, but they also don't mute them. They get curious. When something triggers a strong reaction, they pause and ask, what is this trying to tell me? Not, how do I get rid of this? But what's underneath it? Because behind every emotion, there's a message. Anger might be pointing to a boundary crossed. Sadness might be revealing a need that's gone unmet. Anxiety might be flashing a warning that something in your environment doesn't feel safe or sustainable. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. If you're willing to listen. Now, here's the part most people miss. Emotional intelligence isn't about having no emotions. It's about recognizing them, naming them, and then choosing what to do next. Not reacting on impulse, but responding with intention. That's the difference. When you react, you hand over the wheel to your feelings. When you respond, you take that data and make a conscious choice. That's control. That's power. And smart women don't give that power away. You don't have to fall apart to feel something fully. You can be disappointed and still hold grace. You can feel anger and still speak with clarity. You can be sad and still stand in your strength. Emotions don't cancel out your intelligence. They add dimension to it. They give you access to your full self. And the more you trust them, the less afraid you are of them, the less afraid you are of you. And yes, some emotions are loud, messy, inconvenient, especially the ones we've been taught to hide. But hiding them doesn't make you strong. It makes you fragmented. Smart women don't perform composure. They practice awareness. They don't pretend they're okay just to look polished. They let themselves be real because authenticity builds resilience. And the women who move through life with the most grounded confidence, it's not because they never feel chaos. It's because they've learned how to navigate it without losing themselves. You'll never be able to avoid hard feelings. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop being scared of them, to stop treating emotion like a liability, to stop thinking you have to explain or justify it. You don't. You just have to feel it, understand it, and decide what it's calling you to do. Because when you can sit with your emotions without reacting out of them, you become unshakable. You stop being a puppet on the strings of every bad mood, every criticism, every unmet expectation. You stop spiraling and start observing. And from that place, you lead better, you love better, you live better. Smart women don't stuff their emotions down. They tune in. They listen without judgment. And then they act not from a place of chaos, but from clarity. Because when you understand your emotions aren't your enemy, you finally start moving through life with power, not pressure. One thing I've seen smart women do and do well is guard their energy like it's a limited resource, because it is. And the older you get, the more you realize that time might be valuable, but energy is everything. You can spend time with someone and then walk away fine, but spend energy on the wrong conversation, the wrong environment, the wrong dynamic, and you'll feel it for days. Drained, off center. Like you gave too much of yourself and got nothing grounding in return. Smart women don't just protect their time, they protect their presency. Not everyone deserves full access to you. That doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you aware that your peace, your focus, your emotional bandwidth, they all have limits. And once you start giving those away too freely, you start showing up less and less for the things that actually matter, your goals, your growth, your rest, your joy. See, energy doesn't just get taken. Most of the time we give it away in places we've outgrown, to people who've stopped listening, in conversations that lead nowhere, with habits that slowly chip away at our capacity to feel grounded. And when you don't track where your energy is going, life starts to feel heavy. Not because you're weak, but because you're carrying too much that isn't even yours. Smart women do inventory. They don't just ask, how much time is this going to take? They ask, how will I feel after this? That's the real cost. That's the invisible price tag no one talks about. You might only spend 30 minutes on a call, but if it leaves you emotionally exhausted or mentally spiraling, it wasn't just 30 minutes. It was your entire afternoon. You could give 1 hour to a task that drains your spirit, and now your whole day feels foggy. That's how sneaky energy leaks are. And here's the part people don't always want to face. Sometimes it's not the task. Sometimes it's the people. The ones who never call unless they need something. The ones who talk but never listen. The ones who always leave you feeling less steady than when you showed up. You love them? Sure. But loving someone doesn't mean you let them drain you. Smart women have learned to set quiet boundaries around their energy. They don't announce it. They don't make it a dramatic exit. They just slowly start saying no to what doesn't replenish them. They create space not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom, because peace isn't passive. It's protected. And sometimes the thing that's draining you isn't external. Sometimes it's the internal dialogue, the overthinking, the constant worrying about how you're perceived, or if you said the right thing, or if you disappointed someone by setting that boundary. That kind of thinking eats away at your energy too, which is why smart women not only manage their time and relationships, they manage their mindset. They question the narratives that make them feel small. They challenge the voice in their head that says, you're too much, or you're not enough. They replace those patterns with something stronger, quieter, truer, because the real shift happens when you realize you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to apologize for pulling back. You don't need permission to recharge. If something is draining you more than it's developing you, more than it's strengthening you, more than it's honoring who you are, you have every right to step back. And you don't owe anyone a thesis paper on why. The world will always have more asks, more noise, more expectations, but you only have so much capacity. And smart women don't waste it proving their worth in places that never valued them in the first place. So take the call when it feels right. Say yes when it feels light, but don't hand your energy over just to be polite. Not anymore. Not when you've worked this hard to protect your peace. Because when you stop letting people poke holes in your energy, you finally have the power to pour into what actually matters. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from how loud you speak or how many words you use. It comes from knowing when not to speak at all. Smart women understand this. They've learned that silence isn't weakness, and it's not surrender either. It's a strategy. And sometimes the most powerful move you can make is saying nothing. Not every argument needs your attendance. Not every comment needs a clap back. Not every misunderstanding deserves your emotional energy. That's not passivity. That's control. That's maturity. That's knowing who you are so deeply that you no longer need to constantly defend it. Smart women don't explain themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. They don't engage with chaos just to prove a point. They know their truth and they've made peace with it. And that peace, it becomes a filter, a shield, a signal to the world that says, I don't operate at that frequency anymore. There's a misconception that silence means losing, that if you're quiet, you've backed down. But here's what really happens when you hold your tongue in the right moment. You give yourself space to observe, space to respond, not react, space to watch people reveal themselves. And in that space, the truth almost always floats to the top. Smart women don't rush to fill silence. They let it do the heavy lifting. Because here's what silence actually does. It keeps you in your power. Once you start over-explaining, once you start reacting emotionally just to be heard, you're giving your peace away piece by piece. You're putting your emotional well being in someone else's hands. And smart women, they don't do that. They know that not every situation needs resolution. Not every relationship needs closure. Not every accusation needs a rebuttal. Sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. You ever watch someone unravel all on their own because you didn't play into the back and forth? That's what happens when you stop feeding situations that thrive on your reaction. Silence can be louder than any argument, and it often says exactly what needs to be said. I've outgrown this. I don't move like that. I protect my peace more than I chase your approval. Now, let's be real. Silence isn't always easy, especially when your name's in someone else's mouth, especially when you know you could tear someone down with just a few words. But smart women understand the cost. They understand that every time you choose to engage with drama, you're taking attention away from your goals, your growth, your groundedness. And not everything is worth the detour. There's a certain kind of woman who walks into a room and doesn't need to say much to be respected. Her presence speaks for itself. That's not magic. That's discipline. That's a woman who's built a reputation, not just on what she says, but on what she chooses not to say. Her restraint is part of her power. But this isn't about being cold or dismissive. It's about choosing your moments, choosing your words like currency, valuable, intentional, rare. You don't waste them. You don't throw them into every storm. You speak when there's something to build, not just something to win, and when silence is uncomfortable. When you feel the urge to defend, to correct, to be understood, that's your signal. That's your reminder that your peace doesn't depend on being right. It depends on being centered. When you really start valuing your own alignment over external validation, silence becomes your friend. It becomes a tool you use not to distance yourself from others, but to stay connected to yourself. You'll know you've grown when you stop needing the last word, when you let someone else believe whatever they need to in order to feel right, and you go on about your day unbothered. That's not ego. That's evolution. So the next time you're pulled toward the noise, tempted to react, to explain, to jump in and fix or defend, take a breath. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy, or is this a moment to be still? More often than not, stillness will serve you better, because when smart women choose silence, it's not because they don't have something to say. It's because they know not everything deserves to be said. So here's the truth. Smart women don't get that way by accident. They've been tested. They've been stretched. They've learned through trial, heartbreak, and hard boundaries what they will and will not allow. They don't follow these 7 rules because they're trying to be perfect. They follow them because breaking them costs too much peace, too much power, too much of themselves. They've stopped apologizing for their boundaries. They've stopped saying yes just to keep the peace. They've stopped treating their emotions like liabilities. They've stopped spending energy on what drains them. And they've stopped trying to win every argument just to feel seen. Because at the end of the day, they're not chasing approval. They're living in alignment. And so that's what I want for you, to stop shrinking, over-explaining, bending, breaking, or performing, to know that you don't have to earn your worth. You just have to protect it. Because smart women don't break these 7 rules, not because they can't, but because they choose not to, and so can you.